Hey everyone, welcome to A Mess Nonetheless. I am Rachel.
And I'm Melissa, and we are sisters.
And welcome back.
Oh.
What are you going to say?
This is part of the problem of not really knowing how we're ever going to enter into the beginning of our podcast is we talk over each other. I was going to say welcome back to part 2.
Yep, welcome back.
This.
So if you have not listened to the first part, I highly encourage you to stop and go and listen to it. I honestly don't think it makes sense to start here. I think the lead up of this is in part 1.
Matters. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're not going to spend like hardly any time recapping. So
the recap is go listen to part 1.
The recap is 30 minutes.
Exactly.
So yes. So if this is your first time, welcome. Sorry to make you go back and listen to a different one, but I honestly think that makes the most sense. So we are talking about when God is silent, and this is part 2, and we are working through 5 points of things to consider when God is silent. And so we're on point 4.
Yes. And
because we have a time crunch with me needing to pick up kids from school and Melissa's house being flooded with children any minute, we're not going to spend any time even recapping what the points are. So we're just going to dive into point 4. So when God is silent, the 4th point, and this all comes from an article that a man wrote named Stanton Witherspoon, and we will have the link for that in our show notes. It was really good. And we just decided instead of writing our own points, these were so good. I was like, we're just going to use these. So the 4th point is that we need to recognize that silence can be intimate. So in love, silence is a sign of intimacy and comfort, right?
Yes.
We're not like, oh, we're not talking, everything's weird. I mean, obviously there's times when people are silent and they're weird, but you know, you can just sit around with your kids and just be comfortable.
They can ignore you and it's just fine.
Exactly. Or your husband or your sister. I mean, I have never been silent with my sister. I don't actually know what that looks like.
When we're sleeping, we are silent.
We're silent when we're sleeping, and we're silent when we're listening to a book, but then we're tapping constantly, or Melissa's squeezing because she has the AirPod Pros and just constantly interrupting each other. We're the same way with our mom. It's like if we're together 4 days, it's like literally a 4-day constant gap session. Yes, it never ends. And then on the 4th day, we circle back to what we got sidetracked on the first day.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally, we're like,
we started 7 days ago.
So that's the relationship, or that's the reality of a relationship, is that silence can be a sign of comfort and a sign of intimacy.
Yes, because if you and I were silent with each other, like if that ever were to ever happen, it wouldn't be uncomfortable. We would be completely fine because we're not thinking, why aren't we talking? We're just too tired to talk or whatever.
Exactly. When it comes to Job, God's silence was also a result of the depth of their relationship, right? So Satan, we discussed this in the last episode, Satan approached God and was like, have you considered, and God says, have you considered my servant Job? Like, look at how great he is. And so this is a sign of the depth. The fact that God goes silent, it doesn't mean that Job didn't have a great relationship with God. It doesn't mean that Job did anything wrong. In this instance, it's literally Job did not do anything wrong. That's so weird. Sorry. It says, in trust, God chose Job. My brain wasn't making sense of that. It's because God trusted Job. Yeah. It's because God trusted Job that he chose him for this period. I said in the last episode, for 37 chapters, he was silent.
Yep.
And that's a long time. They're long chapters.
I mean, I think about it from the context of, again, because I'm visual, like if you have a job, if you work somewhere and your boss gives you a task and they stay hands off, it's because they trust you. Yes. They're not walking you through it. They're not engaging in it because it's not because they don't care about you. It's because they trust you in this.
Exactly. And I had never considered that before. That would never have made it into this podcast if I had not read this article and basically we're copying it and putting it on podcasts.
It's not plagiarizing because we're giving him credit.
I was like, this is so good. Why wouldn't we just share this? Like, I never considered that it was because of the depth of the relationship, because of God's immense trust for Job.
Yeah, that's powerful.
It is powerful. And so one of the points we talked about in the last episode was that sometimes we have unconfessed sin and God's being silent because, we went into whole big depth about that. So obviously we're not saying every time God's silent, it's like a pat on your back.
Yeah.
We have to examine each of these points as an individual and let God determine which one it is, right? Or land, I guess. Because like with Job, he did examined his life and was like, no, this is not
Well,
unconfessed sin. This is, I did not bring this on myself. And that's where he landed, like, okay.
yeah. So I've had periods in my life, and I remember a specific conversation with mom several years ago where she was trying to make a decision between jobs. I think it was between two jobs, and she was not hearing anything from God. And so she was, we're talking about it, and I said to her, I said, what if God just really doesn't care? Like, what if he's okay with either one? So he's just being quiet. And I'm realizing that's this right here.
That's
Like,
exactly.
basically, he's being quiet because he trusts you to make the decision, because it's either one is going to be fine. And I think sometimes the silence makes us feel like we can't move forward.
Yeah.
And obviously, like you said, we, go back to episode 1, because you really want to start there. You want to start with those points before you get to this. But if you get through the other ones and you're still like, yeah, I don't think I have unconfessed sin. I think,
it's a process of elimination.
Yeah. So but I never thought about it in that context, and I like it like that. Yeah.
So, I use an example. So I have this ministry, if you guys don't know, where I record videos, and I'm basically talking about things that God's put on my heart through the Bible, sometimes like just an example of my life that, lines up with something scripturally. They're 90-second reels. If you don't follow it, it's Rachel H. Williams Ministry. It's on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. So when I first started making these, it was like a year and a half ago, and I had just had shoulder surgery. And I had this experience where I would go out and I couldn't work out, but I could walk, right? And my physical therapist didn't want my arm like up for 6 straight weeks, like in a 90-degree angle. He wanted me to have my arm down at my side as much as possible, because that's how you avoid having massive issues from being 90 degrees for so long, 6 weeks, whatever. And so I would walk and I would have my arm down at my side, which was very uncomfortable at first, like very uncomfortable. But, the further I progressed, the more I could do it. And I was like maybe 4 or 5 weeks, maybe 3 or 4 weeks post surgery. And I suddenly noticed I was walking too fast. And my body told me, because I had all of this pain, and it was like, stop, or slow down, not stop, slow down. And that was a sign. Like, I didn't know how fast I could walk. I wanted to power walk. I wanted to get my heart rate up. I wanted it to be a workout. And I didn't know. I couldn't have told you how fast I thought I could walk. My body gave me the sign, and my body was like, it's time to slow down. And I slowed down, and everything was better. And so I was relying on my body, to tell me. And I used this example in this video, and I said, when we're praying about something and we don't hear an answer from God, sometimes we just take a step and we start the journey. And we can trust that if we are not on the right path and we are walking in connection with him, he is going to tell us, nope, put on the brakes, go in a different direction, or slow down, right? Slow down, go in a different direction, stop altogether. Like, that's the opening and closing of doors. And I have never forgotten that experience with my arm and being like, I didn't know what my body could do, but my body told me. And sometimes we don't know what God wants us to do. And sometimes he just wants us to take a step, and he will tell us. Now, I don't recommend taking a step without any prayer. I recommend praying. But if you're not hearing from God, so like with Ella, if she's like, oh, God didn't give me confirmation. She didn't say that. But if she did about being an esthetician, I said that in the last episode, she can take a step and the doors will close, right? I mean, the doors closed on hair school and she felt confirmation to pursue that. The doors closed on college and she felt confirmation to pursue that. It doesn't mean you're in the wrong for taking a step. God will determine. And I don't think she was in the wrong for pursuing either of those things.
No.
God made it clear. He closed doors. And
like you said, you can't know until you know. Like, sometimes you just can't know. But sometimes I agree 100% that just sitting here waiting for answers isn't always the way that God talks to us. Bill and I have had that happen so many times in our marriage, where we feel like we're supposed to start going in a direction, and then God changes course, or he shuts the whole thing down. And for a long time, I actually really struggled with that, because it made me feel like maybe I didn't know how to hear from God. Like we were hearing wrong, or we were being stupid. Yeah, exactly. But what God started showing me was, this is how I am guiding you. Like, and you learn through the process. So like, Ella prayed and knew that she got accepted to a college out in Arizona. We live in Minnesota, and she went for 1 semester, and then God shut the doors on that. And she wrestled with that for a while. Like, what, did I hear him wrong? And I'm like, no, but this is part of your story. I don't know exactly what part of your story, but this is part of your story. God isn't going to give us things in our story that are wasted. Like, everything that he allows us to walk through, he will use. he says that. Like,
Exactly.
it's very clear. And so,
Absolutely. So we kind of got a little bit all over the place about this. Like,
mhm,
silence can be a sign of God's trust. But if you're praying about something and you don't hear it, take a step. Just
yeah,
take a step and
mhm,
continue to pray. God, I trust you. I
yes,
trust you to close doors. I trust you to make
yeah,
it clear. And if you're not
yeah,
praying about a decision and he's just silent in your life for a couple months, just trust that he'll come back
yeah,
or come back into the picture. I mean, he never left. He never left
no,
Job.
right,
He just
mhm,
wasn't, Job wasn't audibly hearing from
communicating,
him.
mhm,
And he never left you in that season you discussed in last episode. He's never left me in any of my seasons
mhm,
where I'm silent. I just never realized it might be a sign of his trust of me. Like, I trust my girl that she's going to keep seeking me even when
yeah,
I'm, he trusted Job to
mhm,
continue to be faithful to him.
yeah.
And Job was. Maybe
Well,
when
and
he's silent in our life, he's saying, I trust that Rachel and Melissa are going to keep showing up. I trust that
yeah.
when I check back in 6 months, they're still going to be in the same place, reading their Bible and just waiting.
Well, and I have to believe that when Job got to the other side, I mean, because the rest of his story ends up being amazing. Like, God literally
Mm-hmm.
gave him everything back
Mm-hmm.
in abundance,
Yep.
and and I have to believe that he could look back and be like, I just did that. I went through the
Mm-hmm.
worst time of my
Mm-hmm.
life, and I never blamed God. I never
Mm-hmm.
was. I never did all the things that people told me to do. I stayed focused on Him and connected to Him,
Mm-hmm.
and believed that He was still good. Like,
Right.
that has to. And so sometimes I think God in His silence also can be putting us, not only does He trust us, but also, let's see what you're made of. I
Mm-hmm.
want to show you what you're made of. Like, because
Mm-hmm.
there's something, when we go through something hard and we did it well, that feels amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it
It's
gives us
true.
confidence in moving forward in the next thing that we do.
It's true. It's so true. So our fifth point and last point is keep talking to God.
Yes.
Keep talking to him. Okay, so this is a weird example, but imagine your favorite person, your spouse, your sister, your mother, your kid, whatever, is in a coma. You're not going to be like, oh, they can't talk back to me, so I'm just not going to talk to them.
Right.
You
Yeah.
would continue talking to them because you would
Yeah.
be like, this relationship matters so much to me. I would never stop talking to them
Right.
as long
Right.
as they exist. Even if they die, sometimes people still continue to
I
talk.
was just going to say that.
They
Yeah.
just need to, not
Yeah.
because they think, oh, for sure they can hear me. Not like that, but just like, I
It's
don't
a
know.
connection.
I mean, I'm sure if I lost you, Melissa, I would continue to Marco Polo you. I don't know how I would stop.
Right. Yeah.
I just would
Oh, now I'm
need
going to
to.
cry.
I know. I'm gonna cry too. I feel so sad. I would still Marco Polo you. And it was like, it's not because I would even think you could hear me. I just would.
No, it
I
keeps
just,
yourself connected
yes.
to someone you love.
What a
Yeah.
horrible thought. I wish I hadn't said that.
Excuse us while we dab our eyes. If you're not watching us, we're totally both like tearing up. It's ridiculous.
Oh my gosh, it's so sad.
You know how to
Okay.
cry and laugh, so it might not come across that we're
I
crying.
know
But
you might
we
not
are.
hear it on podcast,
Yes.
but 100% we're crying. Oh my gosh. Okay, so in 1 John 5:14, it says, "This is the confidence we have." Keep talking to God. That's the point. This is the
Mhm.
confidence we have in approaching God. If we ask anything according to His will, He hears us.
Mhm.
We can trust that even if we're not hearing back from Him, even if He feels very far away and silent, He didn't stop hearing from us.
Right.
He's just like, He knew what Job was going through. He knew.
Mhm.
He just wasn't coming back into the picture for
Mhm.
whatever purpose he had in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So we can trust that God keeps hearing us. Just because it seems like he's silent does not mean we should doubt him or stop praying. It does not mean we talked about keep getting in the word. This is the same.
Mhm.
Keep praying. Keep trusting that he is listening to us.
Yeah.
And God's silence is not a license for us to turn our backs on him. It's an invitation to press forward and seek him even more diligently. And
Mhm.
Melissa and I have both experienced that when God feels very silent.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, I just need to press in more because when he does come back, I don't want him to be like, what were you doing that whole time?
Yeah.
I mean, we have to give an account for it. Like if we
Yeah.
had a loved one in a coma and they woke up and they're like, oh my gosh, were you here talking to me the whole time? You're like, oh no, I just stopped coming for 6 months.
Right.
We would
Yeah.
have to give an account for that, right? Like,
Right. Mhm.
I mean, when I get to heaven and Melissa's there before me, she's gonna be like, did you keep Marco Polo me? I'm gonna
If
have
you
to give an
told
account.
me, you would.
No, just kidding about that one. But we have to give an account. And I don't believe that our faith stops growing when God is silent. If anything,
No,
our
I think
faith,
it can grow so much. Yes.
yes, I do. I
Mhm.
believe it grows so much more.
Mhm.
So we had I love this story. We had this land in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. We had like 5.5 acres, and there were not very many trees. So my husband got all these little baby trees. They're called like
Tiny.
seedlings, I think. And they were like 12 inches long from like root to top, right? And him and I went around. He did most of it, but I helped too, and planted 250 trees one year. And you know you're going to lose at least 50% of them. So you do all this work. You dig the holes. You put these little seedlings in. You have to, put out your little tractor that like goes and waters them or whatever. And so we did that. And then a couple years later, we did like 500 trees. Actually, I think it was just like a year later. We did like 500 trees. That time, our neighbor had lent us his tractor in this little thing where it like digs and it was so much better. But all I should say, we planted 750 seedlings. Yeah. And honestly, probably like 200 of them survived. And we had all this like wild land that we didn't do anything with, but it wasn't forest. So we put all these trees out there. So they start 12 inches tall, and every year after winter, so when everything looks dormant and feels like it's died after winter, you see the new growth. I don't know if you guys knew this, but pine trees, because these were pine trees, they show light green. So it's dark green, and they show light green at the tips of all their like little things. And that is the new growth. And then over the next 6 months, it's not light green anymore. It just eventually kind of looks all the same. And then winter comes, and of course pine trees stay green, so it doesn't really look like nothing. But then all of a sudden in spring it shoots up, and so we have these pictures of our daughter Ada like standing next to these trees, and all of a sudden they were like over her head, and she was like 6. So they went from 12 inches in just a few years. They were like over her head, and all because through the winter when it looked like nothing was happening, the spring came, and like we'd have 3-4 inches of new growth, sometimes 6 inches of new growth. And it was so fun because we were so invested in these trees that every year we would look out in the spring and we would be like, oh my gosh, look at how long the new growth is this year. Yeah. And I've always I've always felt like God used that as a reminder to me that because it looks like nothing is happening doesn't mean nothing is happening.
Well, and to pause for people who maybe have never experienced like a northern winter or like everything is snow covered and dead. Like everything looks dead. It
starts out brown. You lose all the leaves. Trees are barren. The only thing that's not is pine trees. Grass is gone.
They're called evergreen. But it doesn't look like anything is happening anywhere. So when you have gone through
and it doesn't feel like anything could be happening because it's so cold.
Freezing cold. Yeah. And so to have the snow thaw and growth have happened, it is they seem opposite of each other. And so that's why she was so fascinated. So if you're from the South and you're like, I don't understand winter, things still grow in the winter, it's because that's not the winter she's talking about.
I should have started with that. So if you didn't understand, go back and listen. It's a beautiful analogy. And so in a quiet season, a silent season, there is still growth happening. And we need to keep showing up for it. God is in control and has been all the same time. Like, okay, let me just back up. I'm going to edit all. God heard Job's cries for help.
Yes.
And in trust, because he trusted Job and he trusted their relationship, he waited for the perfect time to speak. And then Job was reminded of who God was. God answers our prayers. We just have to never stop praying.
Yeah.
He did show up and answer Job's prayers. He showed up and answered. He filled in the blanks. I mean, he was a little sassy about it. If you didn't listen to that last episode, he was sassy about it, but he filled in the blanks. And I know for me, sometimes when I feel like I've had a silent season, I don't always have the answers of the why, but when he comes back, I swear, when he comes back into the picture, I swear it's like all of a sudden everything is alive. Every sermon makes so much sense. Every verse is jumping out to me. Every story is so much more alive to me. Yeah. And I think that's my new growth. Yeah. It's like God's like, here's the abundance that you felt like you weren't getting from me for the 3 months or the 6 months or the whatever, however long it is. And here it is. In fact, one of the books, my first book I wrote, came out of a season of 18 months where I really felt like I couldn't understand anything. And my friend was always, my really good friend Glenda was always recommending books I'd read. And I'd be like, this is good. This is good. This is good. Never really felt like anything was coming from it. And then all of a sudden I came out of this season and like everything made sense to me. I was reading Tozer, like Tozer. If you've ever read a book by Tozer, not the Instagram post, those are very easy to understand. A book by Tozer. He was so like, hard for me to understand. And all of a sudden I understood Tozer. You don't read Tozer. Yeah. I understood him. I was like, this makes so much sense. And it was like, I felt like God gave me all of the season that I had been lacking under like revelation and affirmation and confirmation and all the things in abundance. And that's what he did for Job. He gave Job more than he had ever lost. And it's not like you can make up for all that he lost, but he had so much abundance when he came back into the scene.
Yeah.
So do we have a challenge for this episode?
How's that?
Super great.
Got nothing.
How about, did anything stick out to you?
There we go.
Did anything stick out to you that you're like, whoa, that's what I need to take from this? And pray on it and write it down and remember it and maybe post it on Instagram and be like, this thing is revolutionary to me.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
All right. Well, guys, don't forget that we do have a community page. It's on Facebook. It is facebook.com/groups/a mess nonetheless community. I think it's a mess nonetheless community. I'm pretty sure.
Sounds right.
Yeah. And if you haven't rated us on wherever you're listening to us, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, please do and share us with your friends. And then if you're watching us on YouTube, like our videos and comment on them because we want to hear from you. They show up and we can respond. So, all right. You guys have a great day.
Goodbye.
Okay, bye.
You might feel that your life is a mess, but don't feel bad. Ours is too, but we own a microphone and we have no shame. That's why we'll talk about how our life is a mess nonetheless. That's the name of our podcast.